Thank you for coming to our speakers forum, leadership speakers forum. Most of you I do know, but those who I don't, my name is Orville Jones. I'm the court director for domestic relations and juvenile court. And this is our 4th year in doing leadership series, speaker series and forums. And this year we wanted to focus on not just the leader, but some of the leaders in that organization. We thought it would be helpful for those who are sitting on this side, because we're not all aspiring to be at Leonard. Only I am. But some of us just, we're public servants and we want to do the best we can and move up within that organization without trying to be elected or appointed for something. So with that, that's why we decided to try to bring in leadership roles within that organization. And I think it's been helpful. I had a number of people say that they can identify with people sitting over here more than they can in the leadership spot. So as we move forward, I will ask them questions, but anytime you want to raise your hand and ask them a question directly, please do so, because that's what they're here for. I scared them to let them know that it's being recorded, but that we delete anything that they don't want. So with that, I'm going to ask Director Leonard to give a little bit of his background, and then he's going to introduce his staff, and they're going to do likewise. Director.
I come from a big family. I'm number 9 of 11 kids, and just grew up in Youngstown, Ohio, and then settled here in Columbus after I finished 4 years in the service. I went through ROTC undergrad at Youngstown State, and then served 4 years on went to law school, and then served 4 years on active duty. And after I finished that tour of active duty, settled here in Columbus and just got involved in politics and government service pretty much right off the bat. Was an assistant city attorney for about a year, and then served as the, compliance officer for John O'Grady when John O'Grady was clerk of courts. That's where I met some of the folks that are here today as well, I see. From there, then ended up working with Rich Cordray when Rich Cordray was our county treasurer. Moved on from that to become the county treasurer when Rich became state treasurer, and then served in that role for 9 years. And Orville still calls me treasurer. So, and I run into that every once in a while. People still say Treasurer Leonard. But in about 2 years, well, actually, forgot all about it. 2 years ago, just about 2 years ago now, I became director of the Board of Elections. And the reason I was asked to become director of the Board of Elections was because back in 1998 through 2001, I was deputy director of the Board of Elections. And so that experience, that was the reason I was asked to come back and serve as director of the Board of Elections. So and I realized that coming back after 15 years away, that having had that experience really was vitally important when I stepped into the role as director back 50 days before the general election in 2016. And so it really was important to have had that experience to come back and serve. And so, again, yeah, that's kind of where my role, and that's what's gotten me to that. These are the positions I've held since that have gotten me to this place as director of the board. So.
Thank you. I didn't know that the previous 2 years as deputy director. Can you introduce
Carla Patton?
Yes.
I'll let them introduce you.
Carla Patton. I'm the manager of the operations department in the Board of Elections. I've been with the board for 20 years now. Started out as a voter services clerk, so, minimum wage pretty much, close to that, and have worked my way up through several promotions over these years and to the management position. I was raised in Grove City, Ohio, and when I got the job here, it wasn't something I was going to see myself doing for all these years. I had aspirations to continue on with schooling, which I finally did complete my bachelor's degree with Ohio Christian University, and then I moved forward with getting my master's degree as well in management from Ohio Christian University. So with that background, I actually had aspirations of working in the IT field originally, but as I've worked through the years at the Board of Elections, I've learned to have a passion about the elections and serving the public and the people of our county here in Franklin County. So it's a wonderful position. I wouldn't trade anything for what has happened over the last 20 years and what the next 14 more years brings for me. So,
well, and I was very fortunate because Carla was one of the folks that I hired during the period that I was at the Board of Elections as deputy director. And so just when I came back and to see that she had risen up through the ranks and it was a manager and responsible for really the elections operations. I mean, that's what she does. And so we have a lot of different areas that people really don't realize, and one of those critical areas is operations.
That's going to be a success story at the end. I'm going to ask questions.
that'll be the success story.
Yeah.
And then when I got there, I met Lance because Lance was already in our logistics division. So I'll let him tell you a little about himself.
So my name is Lance Mingo. I am originally from Canton, Ohio. Graduated from Canton McKinley and went directly into the U.S. Marine Corps. I did 4 years in the Marine Corps, served in Operation Desert Storm as well as the Gulf War. After that, I went to the National Guard, did 6 years in the National Guard, and then I actually got into security. I worked for the county corrections in Starr County, and after that, I worked for a maximum security prison in Masson, Ohio. Around that time, after doing so, I got a call from my little brother, Clarence Mingo, and he said, you know, Columbus is growing. A lot of opportunities in Columbus, Ohio. You might want to consider moving, you know. So I said, that sounds good. So I packed my car up, my wife, my children, and moved to Columbus. When I got here, the first thing my brother told me, he said, now you got to understand, I'm the Franklin County auditor, I'm running for auditor here, so we need to establish a rule here. And that rule that I want you to remember is, in Columbus, I am Michael Jackson and you are Tito. So I keep that in the back of my mind all the time. So an opportunity came at the Franklin County Board of Election, and I jumped on it. And unlike Carla and Ed here, I had very little experience with what went on. And I've been there now for 6 years, and it's so much to comprehend that I'm still, every day, I'm still learning different things about the voting process, how it's done, how important all the positions are at the Franklin County Board of Elections. As Ed said, I work in logistics, which we deliver your voting machines to various locations, and we inspect those locations to see that they are up to date with the American Disabilities Act.
All right. I was going to ask you what logistics was performed there. Now I understand. Moving the machines. Okay, so I have a question for you. My first question for you, Director Leonard. Mm-hmm. Tell us about the essential functions of the Board of Elections.
I mean, we carry out the elections in Franklin County, but there is so much that goes into it. And like I said, most people who, when they join the Board of Elections, are surprised. And sometimes they're people who they have worked on the campaign side, but never been in the operational side of it. And there are so many components. You start from the moment somebody registers to vote, and we have a whole division that is responsible for maintaining the voter registrations, updating them when we get new registrations, or somebody who's updating the information on the registration. Then somebody failed to complete it properly, we've got to communicate with that individual. If we get notifications from the court when somebody has been convicted and incarcerated for a felony, that we have to maintain the voter rolls. We get records from the Bureau of Vital Statistics to let us know when somebody's died so that we can make sure we update. So there's a lot that goes into maintaining the voter rolls, more than just somebody registering the vote and then us processing that information. We deal with requests from voters on that information. Then if somebody's wanting to be a candidate, we check, we have a whole campaign finance division and petition filings. When somebody wants to be a candidate, they have to file petitions. We have to check those petitions, make sure that the signatures are valid. We have the staff who receives all of the campaign finance reports, audits those reports, make sure that we notify candidates, hey, your reports are due, and then actually accept those. We have a whole division that deals with absentee, so whether that's absentee in person, absentee by mail, that whole division takes those applications, tracks them, makes sure we have a piece of equipment that's over $1 million that helps us in that processing of all of that election mail that goes out for absentee, and we go to nursing homes to vote people by absentee. We've got an entire division that is responsible for recruiting poll workers, placing poll workers, training them, paying them, which, by the way, if all of you are interested in being a poll worker, it is a paying job. It's not a volunteer gig. It does pay. We always recruit county employees to serve as a poll worker on election day. We train you. You get paid for training. But people don't understand is when you think about what we do in terms of poll workers, we have to fill between 3,000 and 4,000 poll worker slots every election cycle. Now, our staff contacts poll workers and who've worked in the past to see, are you going to be able to work again? If so, can we get you in for training, that sort of thing. So there's a lot, but it's, think of like a Starbucks having to recruit, hire, train, place that person for one day's work, and then they're gone. And oh, by the way, then we're going to come back 6 months later and we're going to do this all over again. And so as an agency, that's one of those vital tasks that we perform. And then, Carla's operation where it's, essentially preparing the ballot. And then, there's a lot that goes into in terms of all the information that comes in to set the ballot. And then on the back end of it, get all the media that has to be put into those machines so that the machines are ready and getting the machines ready. And then on the tabulation side, on election night, when all that comes back, all that's got to be in a very orderly process, has to be brought in, tracked, tabulated correctly, and then doing all the audit functions and recount that goes on if an election goes to a recount. So there's so much involved. And then in terms of what Lance does in the logistics division, in terms of all the logic and accuracy testing that goes into the machines that go out into the field, all the actual logistics of making sure all the right machines go to the right locations and coordinating with the transport companies to transport all that equipment out to the locations, and all the ancillary equipment that has to go with it in addition to just the machines, and going out and looking at every single voting location to ensure that it complies with the Americans with Disability Act. We got to make sure that that happens. And so there's so much that goes in. And then, oh, by the way, after the election, we got to bring all that equipment back. And again, there's just so much that goes into it that someone from the outside might understand one aspect of it or this aspect of it, but doesn't necessarily understand how much really goes into putting on that election. So,
okay, so you got, I have a
short,
lot.
The long answer.
No, I have a lot. So hold on one second. How many of you are poll workers in here? Okay, so we have one. I sign probably 10 each time. And we have a training generally on the 10th floor. Do we have our training? Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
We've sent staff down here to do training.
Oh, it was in here this time? Okay.
Right.
Well, this is good because it's probably a lot more people. Besides, we would generally do it upstairs. So I'm keenly aware of the passion that our staff has to want to help out on voting day. So I do appreciate that.
We appreciate it. Yeah.
Before I ask Carla a question, how many employees work at BOE?
We have 44 full-time employees. We have a 4-member board, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans. And then in the peak of an election cycle, we could have a total of over 200, 206, I think, in the past. Because we've got seasonals who in the warehouse, that's, they're doing all the testing of the machines, and that's probably a group of 40 plus. And most of those are retirees. They come in and do a lot of that work. But then we've got all kinds of seasonal staff that handle, just about every division has seasonal staff that comes in at one time or another during the course of the year.
So you're really efficient because everything you described, I thought you would have a larger staff.
And there are some counties that have a large full-time staff. I think we've been very lean over the year. And when I went back and looked at where we were in 1998 when I first got there, we had 38 employees at that time. And we really haven't grown that much. And we do have an even split of Democrats and Republicans. And then anytime there's ever live ballots in a room or in an area, it's always Democrat, Republican, and they're stored under double lock and key. And
so my concern is that we are the largest county in Ohio, and we don't have the largest staff in our Board of Elections.
I'll tell you, I mean, having served in the Treasurer's office and having served in the Clerk's office before that, it seems like in Franklin County, we seem to do a much better job of running lean operations, and whether it's just the mindset that's been in place for a long time, but that the agencies seem to run leaner. I mean, Treasurer's office was much smaller than other large county treasurer's offices, and so, as I said, I know our Franklin County Board of Elections is a lot leaner.
Yeah. All right, so Carl, I'm putting you on the spot. I told you I was, gave you forewarning. I want 2 days in the life of the manager of election operations. So tell me, 3 months before the election, what is the day like for you?
3 months before an election, that's probably actually a little far out. It gets a little busier. I guess that'd be 3 months, August.
In terms of filing deadline day?
3 months out, we're starting to pick up our pace a little bit. We're looking at all of what we need to do, trying to task and create a calendar for all the events that we have to do. So basically, as the operations department in preparations for an election, we're essentially taking everything that all the other departments do and culminating it into a nice, tight little package of supplies and the ballots and everything else, and that's what we deliver out prior to the election. So in order to be able to do all that in the set amount of time, we have to lay out a strict timeline to get these tasks done. There are certain things that have to be done before the next step. There's other things. There's a couple weeks in there where we're really cranking out a lot of production just because you have 2 tasks that have to be done simultaneously. So we'll split up. So 3 months out, sitting there, we're going through meeting with the different managers of the different departments and letting them know, this is when I need this information from you. This is when I need this from you. And we plan that out. If something goes astray sometime down the line, we'll figure that out and work with it at that time. So basically we're getting ready. We're starting to get ready for the training program of all the precinct election officials. That's also part of our duties in the operations, is all those electronic poll books that we use, all those voting machines that we use, those all get prepped and ready for training and for election back in the operations department. So we're making sure everything's being coordinated with appropriate departments, making sure they have the timelines that we need in order to get our jobs done, in order to put the election on. Because no matter what, deadline is election day. We have to have it done. So if that means that we have to call in some extra help, we're going to do that. If we have to put in some extra hours, we're going to do that. But it all starts with the planning process right up front and making sure we lay out that calendar.
All right, now we're 1 week out. What are you doing?
1 week out, pulling my hair out.
You just keep it short, right? That's why it's cut short? Yeah.
1 week out. Actually, that's when we start packing the supply bags that's when we start receiving in all the information from the vendors that we've contracted out to have the books bound, printed, everything's, we're receiving those in. We're packing all those supplies, making sure all the paper poll books are packed up. Those are our last minute check days, and making sure that's when we can't make an error. We have to be 100% spot on, because as the operations department, like I said, we're that last line before everything goes out of that office. So we have to be spot on. We have to pay attention to those details, and we are checking, double checking, and triple checking to make sure that the work we do is accurate and right.
Or the day of.
The day of. The day of, our department actually handles the trouble hotline for poll workers. So if they're having problems with machines, with the electronic poll books, we're managing those phone lines and helping them get through and troubleshoot the problems that they're having. We're making sure that poll workers are where they need to be, making sure observers are following the law, handling any problems like that. If we get a call, power's out, we're making the appropriate moves to move on and deploy our emergency backup system for power so that we can continue voting the citizens of Franklin County.
Okay, thank you. Lance, when is it the most busiest time for you and your team?
I would venture to say that in our logistics department, the busiest time we have is usually around a month before the election. At this time, we are dispatching our machines to various locations. We're still doing checks of those locations to ensure that they are ADA inspected. And a number of problems arise during that time. We have locations at that time that, for whatever reason, there's something wrong in the parking lot, or the building has a maintenance issue going on. And so it becomes imperative that we're able to be flexible and either handle that problem at location or figure out how we can get around the issue in that area. At that time, a month out, we're also getting a lot of phone calls. Due to the time that we're in right now, with security being paramount with our elections, media circulating things about voter fraud and things of that nature, we have to be on top of our game. And so we're getting phone calls all the time. How can I ensure that my vote's going to count? Is this voting machine, can you rewire this voting machine? Just a number of things people see on television. And so we have to ensure those individuals that call, the voters that call, that yes, your vote is secure. No, these machines have not been tampered with. In a warehouse, we provide all the security for the voting machines. Prior to going out, we lock the machines up. We barcode each machine, and every single area on that machine that is able to be open, once we barcode, we record that. And the barcodes on there are tamper-proof, so if anything is tampered with, we will pull that machine and provide a new one.
How many polling places do you put machines in?
Wow, I think at the moment we are roughly at 450, maybe a little over.
It's 355.
355 now.
Oh, 355?
Yeah, we got 861 precincts, but
Okay.
355 locations.
Okay. So, what's the cost associated with moving all of that? And like drop off and pick up of all the machines and equipment?
In order to get our voting machines to the proper location, we actually have a trucking company that comes prior to every election, just a couple of weeks out, and they actually load these machines up, and they'll spend hours every day with our seasonal guys moving these machines to various places. And the cost of that runs in the thousands.
Oh, yeah. We do have a significant transportation cost, and then obviously the personnel cost that goes along with it in terms of the labor that takes to get all that equipment prepped onto the trucks and then off the trucks, and again, they're all under, as Lance mentioned, is anything there's a port, there's a tamper-proof seal on it. The carts that the machines are in have a lock on it. That lock has a seal on it. The poll workers get that key. So again, there's so many other controls that are in place to ensure that the machines aren't tampered.
We're also renting vehicles for our seasonal workers so that they're able to continually check the locations for any discrepancies prior to the election.
Treasurer again. Director Leonard. I said it. I said, I'm like, Director Leonard, here's the interesting, because I'm listening to all that, and I noticed that you're probably more physically engaged in the operations at the Board of Elections than you probably would be at the Treasurer's office. So I have a question, like, what is the difference in leadership requirements from you in being an elected official and one being appointed?
It is different. Obviously, the whole elected component of it, that you've got to be out a lot more in the community and focused on the election aspect of it. And But in terms of and so in some ways that forces you to rely more on the team that you've put together in an elective office, because you have some of those, I always referred to, external facing responsibilities. You've got to be engaged in the community. You've got other activities that you have to do that face outward, and so you have less time to focus on the things internal. But when you do, you've got to rely on the team that you've put together. And that was, in terms of that transition for me, that was probably the hardest thing in my career, was going from that point of being the person who is working on the staff and focusing on helping to get things, and really on the front line of getting things done, and moving to the point of being the elected official where you're establishing what the policy is going to be and how, what you want to get accomplished, and then working with the staff to help get that accomplished, and being willing to delegate. And a lot of that is learning to trust and developing that team, but then trusting that team to carry out those activities. So in terms of the difference between being appointed, you do have the opportunity to be a bit more hands-on, because some of those external facing responsibilities are less in an appointed role. But even what I found is that in the Board of Elections, because of the fact that we're involved in elections, there is a lot of external facing responsibilities, because you've got to assure the public of the security of the voting system, and because it is that engagement in one of those fundamental processes that people are concerned about, that you do have to have a greater level of engagement than some other types of appointed leadership positions. So it is in some ways very much like an elected position, because you do have to be out there engaged in the community and communicating in the media relations and community relations. But you just don't have to campaign for the job. So, but there still is that relationship building, because I tell you, we don't do this by ourselves. There are a lot of organizations in the community that we work with to communicate what we're doing and helping us get that message out, and even internally to the county. Facilities management, I mean, helps us. Our PFM and purchasing in terms of the print shop. We work closely with the print shop. So there are governmental, other relationships within county government, the sheriff's department, and others that we interact with that are important for us to be able to carry out our mission. We couldn't do without them. So.
All right. Earlier this year, you sent out a communication asking for volunteers to come in and help you select new voting machines. Mm-hmm. So, Carla, I was one of those people who responded.
Good.
So there's 3 questions for you on this, since I was involved in it. Here's my question. Why was the decision made to use voters to help with the selection?
Well, basically, with any business, if you're serving the public, your customer service is #1 priority. You want to make the voters happy. So, we wanted the voters to come in, and we wanted their opinion as to which voting system they had a preference of. We don't want to go against what their desires are. We want to listen to them and hear their voice and make the best decision that we can make in the future of purchasing a new voting system, to where they're going to feel the most comfortable and most confident that their vote is being cast the way they want it to be cast, and that it is going to be counted. So, customer service is #1, so bring the customer in.
Okay, so I'm asked to dig a little deeper. So how was the process, though, enhanced with them? I mean, because you were personally going back and forth and asking questions as we were coming out of each, I guess it was a booth, but you were right there with us. So tell us how it was enhanced using us.
So not only getting the opinion of the voters, but also, in our minds, it's also helping us. One, we had some poll workers in there that we brought in and did a quick training with. We wanted to see how they were doing with setting up the equipment and processing voters. As far as the public being in there, it kind of gives us an idea to start thinking about the streamline of the process of voting, of how do we set up polling locations in the future, knowing this is, how the system's going to work. So, there was a lot of things, underlying items that we were looking at and observing with the voters as they came in and tried the different systems out, as well as the poll workers that we brought in to manage the quote-unquote polling location for the day.
Okay. That's what it felt like. So what was the takeaway for that selection process when you, I think there was three different vendors that when I was there, it was 3 different vendors. What was the takeaway of how the selection process would take place once we all got done sharing our thoughts?
Basically, you know, again, the opinion of the voters, it seemed to have a strong leaning towards that the voters in Franklin County still liked an electronic-based voting system. Contrary to what national news says of paper being the more trusted method of voting, our voters in Franklin County have always voted on electronic voting machines, and that seems to be the desire of the voters, that they want to continue. They have the confidence in the electronic system. They have the confidence in our office to make sure that those votes are being counted and counted accurately.
Okay, thank you.
I have a follow-up question to that, Orville. So, you know, with the electronic ballots, you know, one thing that sometimes I think about is, you know, when I file my taxes, I file them online, and most people are moving to like mobile apps and things like that. However, you've mentioned numerous times security is obviously a big concern. So is there any point where we might move from polling locations using the electronic system to having like apps or voting from our computers or anything like that? Or is it just a prohibitive aspect from a security standpoint?
Right now, there's a lot of security concerns, especially with internet-type voting, especially in recent years with, you know, with the Russian, you know, theory of hacking. So will I say that would never happen? No, that could be down the road as more security enhancements are created to alleviate issues of hacking. So I think in the future, yes, you could see something a little more like that, but part of the processes of voting is now internet-based or app-based, but we do have UACAVA that does email ballots at this time. So there is a tendency that is trending more towards an electronic-based, but I think it's still going to be a few years. But like I said, I would not rule that out in the future as being a possibility.
If I could add to it, because I've had that same question recently as well, and back when I was at the Board of Elections in 1998, that was all the talk. Oh, we're going to go internet voting some point. And the challenges of it, though, are, and it may be that technology will let us get beyond that at some point of the challenges, but one of those challenges that when you do your banking, there's always a connection between you and your transaction. And with voting, you've got to have this capability to ensure that you are the person you're saying you are, and have all of the verification necessary and security measures, but then at the same time being able to detach that vote that you've cast from your identification information. And I'm sure there's technology out there that will eventually allow us to overcome that hurdle, but it may be some time. But the other challenge is it's money. Elections are oftentimes not the function that receives the funding. And so what we've seen just the last time when it took the 2000 election for funding to be made available through the Help America Vote Act that got new machines back in 2005, 2006 timeframe. And now we're looking at, you know, it's been that long, it's taken a long time before we've gotten another round of funding for the voting machines that we're about to, the voting systems we're about to embark on. And so the concern about being able to do it internet is that there's going to have to be constant investment in keeping ahead of the technology so that we can ensure that security. And the challenge of that is that money going to be there? Is there going to be that willingness to make the investment on a constant basis in order to keep the security in place necessary to do electronic voting? I think you may see some apps. I mean, even one of our vendors does have an app where you could do it on your phone, and then you take your phone to the polling location, you scan a QR barcode, and boom, your ballot pops up on the screen, and you just finish casting your vote. Some of that type of technology that would facilitate the election process, but in terms of online or internet, there's obviously some challenges that would have to be overcome, and then obviously the financial aspect of it. So,
any other questions? Lance, I have a question for you. So, 4 years in Marine Corps,
Yes,
6 years of reserve,
yes.
and 6 years here at the Board of Elections. So first, thank you for your service, because I'm sure it was people like me you were out there protecting. But the reason why I wanted to bring that up is you seem to have a passion for public service in different capacities. So I want to know, can you think of a day or a moment when you served in public service, when you've helped someone and they've come back and said, you know, I really appreciate what you've done?
I stated before that I worked at Stark County Corrections, in Stark County Corrections. And, you know, it's a very different environment. And I have always had a belief, an attitude that that I'm going to treat an individual a certain way no matter what he or she has done. And I let that be known to all the prisoners in this facility, that you have a clean slate with me. No matter what you've done, no matter how crazy, how violent it is, I'm going to treat you as like you deserve to be treated, which is a human being. And so throughout my years of working at the prison facility, my wife and I, later on, we would be in a grocery store, and I'd have someone come up to me, not knowing who this individual was, nor did I even remember, and they would say, "Hey, Mr. Mingo, I'm Chuck. I had you were at the Stark County Correctional Facility." I said, "Oh, yeah. I remember you, Chuck. Hey, I just wanted to thank you for how you treated me." And some of them even say, that was the first and the last time someone has ever treated me like that. And I got this all the time. And to this day, I still see people that were incarcerated that come up and thank me. And I never knew, I would have never guessed in a million years how rewarding that would be. Who I was as a leader, how it would impact people, and for how long that impact would last. But it just trickles down, and so I really enjoyed that time. I found it to be very rewarding.
Okay, that's touching. We run a juvenile detention center here, but it's interesting that you say that, because the experience that most people who are inside experience there has a lot to do with their reentry.
Yes.
And how
Absolutely.
they feel about themselves coming back into the community. And that you said that is really important to me, that that's a greater service as you're serving in the military for us, because what you just did was allow somebody to have their dignity. What you did was allow someone to have a new start and some self-confidence in themselves to hopefully go back and be a positive citizen. So I did not know that's what your response was going to go, so I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and it's not an easy task. I had to erase my brain every single day after work and sit in the parking lot for 15 to 20 minutes thinking about, I need to go in here fresh. And that's one of the job's responsibilities of a leader. Every time, no matter what you're involved in, if you are a leader, you have to have that consistency. You have to be able to be empathetic. You have to be able to move and speak without allowing your emotions to govern what you say and what you do.
Thank you for that. Carla, you said at one point you thought you would get involved in IT, information technology, but you kind of do on a daily basis, correct?
I do.
And you work with the data center at times here, right?
Yes.
Tell us that interaction. So what is the operations like, IT operations like at BOE, and how do you interact with other agencies in that capacity?
So again, we handle, operations. We deal with the database for the tabulation system of programming the ballots, and tabulating the votes on election night. We also deal with 1,500 iPads for the electronic poll books that we're responsible for keeping up to date with the iOS system, putting all the voter information on there, making sure that everything's working the way it works. Of course, with 1,500 electronic poll books, we had a special secured network put in just specifically for those. So a lot of work took place with the data center and getting that installed, and we have to call every election. We have to call the data center, make sure our ports are open, to make sure that we can get the information to push down to the electronic poll books, because I love, with the click of a button, with technology these days and programs, click of a button, I can push the application out to all poll pads at one time. And actually the technology keeps advancing. I can shut them down now with the click of a button, which, going through and cleaning 1,500 poll pads, shutting them down individually, that takes some time. So, I work with data center mainly for election night, web display purposes. They are responsible for coming in and processing the votes that I give them and displaying them on the web display that you guys can see from your home and watch those results scroll in, see who's winning what. And there's always room for improvement with any kind of system that you're have implemented and continue to use. Every election we're trying to change one more thing, make something better, listen to our public, what they want to see. Hey, can we get this done? And and they'll work through. Obviously, coming up to a new voting system, there's going to be a lot of work with the data center, making sure the files are in the right format for them to process through. Running tests. We run a test a week before the election, every election. Our data center comes in and they run a whole mock test, putting results up. We check them, make sure everything's right. So, we're making sure everything's, I send them files, they send me something back. They send me a development website back. You need to check this out. Is this what you want to see? No, can we tweak this? Can we change this to be this color? Can we change the name here, make it this? Okay, make the changes, send it back, more approval, and then we move forward. Again, planning for those future elections, you've got to look at what technology is out there. Technology is an ever-changing world. New things are coming available every day. And so it's just looking at some of our processes and seeing how can we streamline this better and do less manual work and more, let's just push this out, get it done, don't have to touch it. And trust me, that technology is coming through every day. And so it's just a matter of finding that right program, that right technology to work for the right task at hand.
That's good. I'm glad we're staying contemporary. It's important. It helps with
That's
integrity.
how we keep our staff numbers down.
Yes, how you keep it down. Well, that's good. Director Leonard, what type of voter turnout do you anticipate? And can you tell us, what about the absentee voting, and actually, what do you expect on voting day?
Well, presidential, we had about 70% voter turnout, which is very, very strong voter turnout. I don't think it'll be at that level, but it will definitely be greater than what we saw in 2014. 2014, a little bit less so. But in terms of absentee and early vote, I think we're going to continue to see a growth in that. It's just become a very popular way for people to cast their vote. It's very simple. You got 28 days in which to do it, and so there's plenty of time to do it. It's very convenient, and so we do have a growing number of people who choose to come out to the Board of Elections offices at 1700 Morse Road and cast their ballot there, but also a growing number of people who take advantage of vote by mail, absentee. The last presidential election, we had just under 40% of the people who voted chose to vote absentee by mail or absentee in person. So it's become a growing part of how we conduct elections. And from a election standpoint, we prefer that because it's a far more manageable method for casting the vote, and it takes the stress off the election day polling locations.
So I have one last question for you. Any other questions before I get one? Yes, Mike.
I'm happy to serve as a roster judge captain for this upcoming general election. And so my questions are from the different in particular, this upcoming election, you offered a paper by choice option. What rationale goes into that playing a factor when you decide to offer it? Because I understand it's not offered at each election.
So that decision came down as a factor, I believe, of the 2008 elections from the Secretary of State defined to us as an agreement with the League of Women Voters that some people may have not felt comfortable with electronic voting. At that time, it was still fairly new nationwide for a lot of places. And so with that, some voters had more confidence in the paper, and so we wanted to give them that choice. The Secretary of State, decided to make that change. And so as far as the times that it's introduced, that it's available, that was, again, it was part of an agreement with the League of Women Voters, that it's sad to say, the higher turnout elections where people have a higher peak of interest, those federal elections, the presidential primaries, I wish there was more interest in the more local elections, but it just doesn't go that way. And so, but for the national races, they want to make sure that voters have the confidence in the method that they're casting a ballot. So the offer of paper ballot is become available in those elections.
And can you explain how the provisional votes are processed?
So when the provisional votes come back into our office, our staff, voter services staff and seasonals, they'll sit through and they make sure, one, that the envelope's filled out completely. There are requirements of the envelope that must be filled out: your name, your address, your date of birth, some type of ID must be provided, and a signature. Once we determine all that, then we make sure that the information is accurate. Were they registered to vote? Were they somewhere in the county? Were they registered to vote somewhere in the state of Ohio? The information matches. As long as all the requirements are met, and it's a dual process done by a Democrat and Republican both, sitting at side by side, reviewing the ballot, the information on the ballot. They make their recommendations of which ballots to count and which ones, because someone may not have been registered prior to the registration deadline. And so once that's done, then the board makes the vote, and then our staff, and with bipartisan teams, open the ballots, and that's those ballots that are deemed to be valid are counted and included in the official count within 21 days after the election.
And just to clarify, is that when our staff is processing those, they're processing the envelope, the ballot envelope. So if you've ever voted provisional or have seen somebody vote provisionally, they fill out their ballot, a paper ballot, and stick it into an envelope, but they've completed the affirmation form on the front of the envelope. They've signed it. And so our staff, when they're processing it, never sees that ballot. They're simply reviewing the envelope with the ballot inside of it, confirming that it's been filled out correctly, that the person is in fact eligible to vote. They may have been registered in another county. Whatever the criteria is, that person meets that criteria for that provisional ballot to be counted, and then they're presented to the board, and the board then approves the counting of those provisional ballots. And at that point, then our staff removes them all from the envelopes, separates the envelopes from the ballots, and then counts the ballots through the tabulating machines. So that vote always is maintained confidential, so nobody is able to attach that vote to the provisional ballot envelope. So, and about 87% of those provisional ballots get counted on an annual basis in that range. And again, so if it may be that the person, if it doesn't get counted, it's because the person wasn't registered to vote, or they may have not filled out the affirmation correctly. They left off a vital piece of information that prompted the provisional ballot to have to be rejected.
I had a question over here.
Yeah, do you have voting machine modules or props available for presentations with young voters?
We do have some of those available. We're all more than willing to come out and do a demonstration of the current voting system we have. In fact, we just did a video of how to use the current machine. I just got to work with our staff about getting that online so that we can do that. And I know once we make the final selection on a new voting system, that's another component that one of the first things we want to do is get a number of the voting units, machines in county so that we can start that process of educating voters, going out to different constituent groups and different organizations to demonstrate the new equipment, not only from the standpoint of how does this equipment work, but also in terms of what are the security measures that exist for that particular system, so that people will be not only confident that they know how to cast their vote, but they're confident that their vote's going to be secure.
Is it something like someone from our office could utilize to take to a presentation?
Probably
as a Board of Elections person.
a Board of Election person. But we could always arrange to have a Board of Election person come out and.
We've done demonstrations for various organizations. We've done demonstrations for Girl Scouts of America. We've done demonstrations for, back a few years ago when they had the 50th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act, we did demonstrations for various groups with that. So, you know, we've had voting at the state fair at one time for the best art. And so we're always willing to reach out for an organization and provide a voting machine with a staff member to help out.
So one final question, because it's coming into lunch, and that's for you, Director Leonard. So as a takeaway for the audience, you've worked in a number of leadership positions. Can you leave us with 3 leadership points that you live by daily?
3, gosh.
4.5? No. 3's hard.
One, it started in terms of over the last couple of years, I came across the concept, and it's really something I realized that I've been doing for a while. And even the second one, first one was start with why, and it was just some reading that I had done over the last couple of years, and it really is a focus on why do you do things. Different companies do the same thing, and they may even do it similarly, but why you do it, if you focus on why you do it, then I guess whether it gives you more focus on the importance of what you do and the importance of how you do it by focusing on why you do it. And for me, it kind of, again, it came back to when I had this kind of career change from the treasurer's office to the kind of figuring out what I was going to do next. It was focusing on, well, why have I been in public service? And public service is because I felt like I was making an impact. And so by focusing and really focusing on why I was in public service made me realize that I wanted to stay in public service, because I recognized that was kind of what I was built to do, and that's kind of where my focus is, and that's where I find a purpose. And then the other one I think is Leaders Eat Last, and that was both of those books are by an author named Simon Sinek. And Leaders Eat Last really comes from my military service as well, is that it's putting your people first. And so when leaders eat last, it's like, well, you're the last in line. You're the captain in charge of a platoon or a company. your team eats first. Your team is most important. It's not about you, it's about them. And what I've learned in leadership is that you can't do it all by yourself. I mean, you need to, the importance of your team to being successful is critical. And so you do have to put them first. And then probably would be focus on the big rocks. And that's that, and I don't, people may have heard this, it's a management story where the professor comes up to the front of the time management instructor comes to the front of the room, and he takes out 3 big rocks and puts them in the jar, and then he puts in some large gravel and throws that in the jar, and then throws some pebbles in there, and then next thing you know, he pours sand in the jar, and he asks the students, "What's the lesson that you picked up from that?" It's like, well, one of the students, time management, says, well, there's always time for something. You can always fit extra, you can find ways to fit extra time. And it's like, well, that's an interesting concept. But the concept that comes from that exercise is put the big rocks in first. Is that if you don't, then you'll never get the big rocks in if you don't put them in first. And so it's the idea of prioritizing the big rocks. And so I remember when I first got to the Board of Elections, that was one of the things I did was big rocks. And I made my list of the big rocks, and it was, in terms of the voter registration software and the voting system. And, still working on some of them, but again, it's just keeping focused on the big rocks, or else you will lose sight. And it is so easy to get lost in the day-to-day fires or issues that need to be addressed that it's easy to lose sight of the big rocks unless you keep a focus on it. And some of that is engaging your staff to help you stay focused on that.
So thank you. So I'm going to sum it. So leaders, you first ask why you're doing something, and then you eat last, and you make sure you focus on the big rocks. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So I'm going to take away with all of that, and I'm going to get that book. So I appreciate all 3 of you for spending your time with us. It's always difficult to have to sit in front of everyone else and explain why you function the way you do and have us critique you. But we appreciate everything you've done. We appreciate the service of making sure we vote well and letting us know that our vote count and that there's an integrity behind your system. We're going to really appreciate that, and we know you're going to be busy. Come first Tuesday of November, and you have volunteers, and we're all supportive of that. So can you help thank them for that? Thank you so much.